Hello and welcome to EngLearn. Today we're looking at how to analyze form, structure, and language. This was a much requested video and is packed with valuable information, so let's get right to it. The previous version of the exam did not ask students to analyze form and structure, so many students and even teachers find this confusing. In this new syllabus, however, analyzing form, structure, and language comprises a huge part of Paper 1, which makes it super important to know what you're looking for. You will need these skills for both question 1b, where you're asked to compare your own text with the given text, and the entire question 2, which carries a whopping 25 points. The first thing you need to know in order to develop these skills is what language, form, and structure refer to. Just like you, I really hate complex and complicated definitions that you might find in textbooks, so let's keep this simple. Language simply refers to what words the author chooses to use to tell you his ideas. This can include word choice and different figures of speech and language devices. Form refers to the genre of the text and how the genre influences the way the text looks on the page. So, if you know what to look for, you can notice many elements of form as soon as you lay your eyes on the page. Structure refers to how the author organizes information he wishes to convey, and how that information fits together to make the text a unified whole. These are just simple definitions, but we will go over the elements in detail, and after the video, you will know what each of the elements entails and how to recognize them in the text. Let's start with language. We will have several videos devoted to each element of language, so I will not go into great detail here, but I will list the main things to look for under language. First, you're looking for any interesting lexis. Lexis is just a fancy word for vocabulary. So, you're trying to find any interesting vocabulary the author has chosen to use, and you're trying to figure out why he used those particular words. This is especially important for words with very pronounced positive or negative connotations, or words scattered throughout the text that belong to the same semantic field. Under language, you're also looking for different figures of speech. There are many of them, and you're probably familiar at least with the most important ones like metaphors, similes, and personification. As we've mentioned many times, it's important not just to identify the figure of speech or give a very generic effect, but you need to explain in detail why the author used that particular figure. If you're reading a persuasive text like a speech, a review, or an article, you will also be looking for persuasive techniques. These are language techniques for making an argument and convincing the reader to support your point of view. Finally, language also includes grammar, syntax, and punctuation. Although they're often overlooked, these elements play an important part in every text, influencing emotions and creating a specific rhythm or pace of the text. Longer or shorter sentences, use of varied punctuation, and use of particular tenses can all have an effect on how the reader feels the text. That's all I'm going to say about language for now, but I am planning, as I said, to make further videos about each of these components. Today, we will focus on form and structure. Let's look at elements of form and structure and how to recognize them. When it comes to form, I'm going to discuss three different aspects of form. Number 1, how the text reflects the characteristics of the genre. Number 2, what the text looks like on the page. And number 3, how the text appeals to its intended audience and how the purpose affects the content and style of the text. The first two are traditional notions of form in writing, and the third aspect is how form is defined by examiners in examiner reports for AS Level 9093. So we want to make sure to cover all of these. Let's first look at the first aspect, how the text reflects the characteristics of the genre. As you already know, every genre has its own rules or conventions, and knowing these rules is an absolute must for this exam. You need to demonstrate to the examiner that you know these rules, and one of the ways you can demonstrate it is by commenting on how form is related to genre. All genres have a specific kind of form they follow, but in some cases the connection between form and genre is more obvious. Take poetry, for example. Don't worry, you don't have to study poetry for this exam, but it's a very good way to illustrate the connection between form and genre. For example, there are very clear differences between, say, a long epic poem and a haiku. A sonnet is one form that has to follow very strict form rules. A reader who knows his poetry will immediately, just by looking at the page, recognize this poem as a Shakespearean sonnet, which will in turn create a set of expectations in his head about what the poem is about and how the author conveys his ideas. Advertisements and leaflets also have a very strong visual component. The form has a strong influence on how the reader perceives the information. While you will not have to read any poetry or have any visual leaflets or ads in the exam, there are some genres that you will read where the form is extremely important. Look at this letter, for example. If you take away the visual elements, like the address at the top, the subject, the salutation, the ending, the text is no longer a letter. These elements, which are very visual, show the reader that the genre is a letter, so the reader has certain expectations and can follow the text better. So one of the elements you can comment upon is how the form reflects the genre. Another way to comment on form is through discussing generally how the text appears on the page. Here are some elements you might look for. We have anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of words or phrases at the beginning of neighboring clauses. If you've ever read the famous "I Have a Dream" speech by Martin Luther King Jr., you will have noticed the use of anaphora in repeating the phrase "I have a dream" at the beginning of consecutive sentences. Repetition usually serves the purpose of emphasizing a point, but of course you need to always be careful to analyze what point is being emphasized. You can also look for single-line sentences, which stand out from the rest of the text. They often mark an important turning point in the text. Whenever you see one, stop and think about why the author chose to put it there. It can often tell you a lot about how the text progresses. Short sentences within a paragraph are often used for emotional impact, and they too stand out from the longer sections of the text. So do very short paragraphs. The emotional impact of a short sentence like silence is much stronger than if the author was to elaborate on how horrible and excruciating the silence was in a very long descriptive sentence. Ellipses, where a certain part of the text was omitted, as was the case in Frederick Douglass' speech we read together, can also be immediately noticed. It should make you wonder and analyze why the section of the text was omitted. What was the author's purpose in removing that part of the text? Dialogue is another element that stands out on the page. You can analyze why the author chose to include dialogue and what purpose it plays in the text as a whole. The use of subheadings, which divide the text clearly into subsections, or the use of bullet points for lists, is another visual element that is often used in articles or leaflets. You can link the subheadings with the content of the paragraphs or comment on the use of bullet points. Any of these elements falls under form, and if you notice any of them, first you should carefully consider why the author chose to use them, and then you need to analyze and comment on their use. Now that we've covered how form is linked to genre and what to look for under visual elements of form, we can take a look at a different definition of form. In this sense, we will look at form as the way the audience and purpose of the text influence the style of writing. Audience, of course, are people who are reading the text. Purpose is the goal with which the writer is writing the text. Audience and purpose are what we call whole text aspects, and as our favorite diagram here shows, they're always mutually influenced by particular devices the author uses. So essentially, here you're being asked to demonstrate how these whole text aspects influence the writer's individual word choices and how those word choices demonstrate the author's awareness of audience and purpose. Let's take these two examples. Imagine one author is writing an article about a new video game in a gaming magazine. Another writer is writing an article about the same game for Wikipedia. These two texts have very different audiences, the first one being gamers and the second one just about anyone on the internet. They also have very different purposes. The Wikipedia article aims to provide general information about the game, while the gaming magazine article needs to provide much more detailed information in order to maintain the interest of the readers. So, what can the author do to make sure his text suits his audience and fulfills its purpose? One of the main ways to appeal to an audience and to fulfill your purpose is through tone and register. Tone is the writer's attitude towards the subject. Register is the level of formality the author uses, so whether he's being very formal, using sophisticated language, or informal, using chatty and colloquial style. In the example we gave here, the writer who writes for the gaming magazine will most likely use a more informal style to make his piece entertaining for his readers and to make them feel closer to him. The gaming community itself is rather relaxed, so there is no need for a high level of formality. On the other hand, an article on Wikipedia needs to meet the standards of an encyclopedia and needs to be written in a more formal register. At the same time, the readers of the gaming magazine probably have a lot of knowledge about the subject matter. The author will not shy away from using specific jargon, specialist language, for describing the game. On the other hand, the Wikipedia article will use more standardized lexis, sticking to well-known expressions. If specialized terms are used, they will likely be explained and defined. Also, when explaining certain concepts and issues, the authors will be likely to use examples that are close to their audience. Take this video, for example. Because I'm talking to high school students, I chose to use the gaming example in this case, because this might appeal to you as young people. I would have made a big mistake if I chose a topic most teenagers are not interested in. All writers pay attention to details like that, and your task in analyzing form is to notice those elements. Finally, let's talk about structure. Structure, again, goes back to how particular parts are connected to the whole. It refers to the way in which the writer organizes the information in the text and in which order he chooses to reveal it. It also refers to how parts of the text fit together to make a whole. Structure is content-driven, and we can look at how information is organized both on the level of the entire text, but also within each paragraph. So, what are we looking for when commenting on structure? Firstly, we're looking at the beginning and the ending. I'm sure your teachers have told you many times that these are perhaps the most important parts of the text. We're also looking at development, contrast, shifts, and pace. The beginning of any text is very important because the writer has only a few seconds to interest the reader to read the text. Authors use different techniques to hook the reader in, and depending on the text, you may wish to analyze how the author achieves that purpose. The ending, on the other hand, leaves the biggest emotional impact on the reader. Depending on the topic, the ending may be conclusive or non-conclusive. Non-conclusive endings in fiction works can be cliffhangers, and in non-fiction works, the author might want to leave a question open to debate, without offering a final word on it. A common strategy writers use to make their work very well organized is using a cyclical structure. This is when the story ends in the same place it began, or in non-fiction, where the author uses the same idea at the end of the text that he used at the beginning. This can make the text feel well-rounded. So you might want to look at the beginning and the ending and see if there are elements of cyclical structure. In between the beginning and the end, most texts progress in a linear manner, meaning there is some natural development or progression of ideas. So you want to look at how the author develops his ideas and what topics he deals with. Another thing you may wish to look at is whether there is a change in the intensity of tone and mood in the text. For example, whether the tone moves from slightly melancholic at the beginning towards openly depressing towards the end of the text. Sometimes the authors organize different elements of the text in such a way that they don't gradually build upon one another, but instead clash. This is the use of contrast, when two neighboring paragraphs in a text discuss completely opposite topics or deal with a topic in a completely opposite manner. If you find juxtaposition between different elements of the text, that is contrast, and it might be worth commenting upon. Another thing you might want to look at are shifts. Any major shift in focus or topic on the theme of the text should be commented on. When I say focus, I mean what the author is focusing on in each paragraph. So you might notice that there is a shift from the focus on the exterior to the interior of a building. Or the author might shift focus from describing the environment to describing a particular character's or his own mental state and thoughts. The environment and thoughts might often be intertwined and reflect one another, so you might comment on that too. The author might also shift focus from a general discussion of an idea to a specific example, or from a generic phenomenon to an individual's experience of that phenomenon. These are all worth analyzing and commenting on. You can also comment on the change of the subject or the theme, which refers to more subtle underlying meaning of the text. To indicate such shifts, authors sometimes use one-sentence paragraphs. Look for them to give you a clue. Finally, another element of structure is pace. Pace simply refers to how fast the text progresses. Think of it in this way. An action film usually evolves much more quickly than a slow romantic film. So how do authors slow or speed up the pace of a text? Faster-paced texts usually have shorter paragraphs and shorter sentences with more action, dialogue, and exciting events. On the other hand, slow-paced texts feature longer sentences and paragraphs with more narration and description than dialogue. Authors add details and may use flashbacks or foreshadowing to slow down the main action. I hope you now have a better understanding of what to look for when analyzing form, structure, and language. One thing I have to point out, though, is that all the information I gave here is by no means some kind of a checklist you need to go through for every text. Instead, this is just a framework to help you think about the different elements that usually appear in texts. Every text is different, and there is no one unique approach that fits every text. However, practicing analysis using these elements will hopefully help you out no matter what kind of text you face in the exam. And finally, if you want all this information in one place, you can go to our website and get a free infographic with the most important information from the video. The link is in the description below. If there's anything that was left unclear or anything else you wish to talk about, please comment in the comment section below or send us an email. Happy exam season, everyone!